My name is Elaine Gunn, and I'm with Mrs. Frances Duval of Pittsfield. And Mrs. Duval has consented to be a part of our oral history project, oral history for the invisible community. And I will now begin the interview. Fran, I'd like to ask you who your parents were and where they were born.
My mother was Estella Grant from Lennox, and my father was John Persip, and he was born on South Mountain Road in Pittsfield.
Do you know why they came to Massachusetts or where they came from?
I really don't know where their ancestors came from, because my grandmother was born here also in Cummington.
Both grandparents born in this area?
Yes.
Do you remember when your parents came to Berkshire County?
They've always been
They've always
here.
been here. And prior to that, so your grandparents were here too.
Right.
So you don't know the history of where they came from to Berkshire County.
Nope, I don't.
Do you remember their names?
I believe my grandmother's name was Hamilton.
Is that maternal or which your father's mother's mother?
That was my father's mother. My grandmother in Lennox, I believe, came from Long Island.
May I ask you when you were born, or is that?
I was born on New Year's Eve, 1916, in Pittsfield.
So you lived here all of your life?
I've lived here all my life.
Your brothers and sisters?
They were all born right here in Pittsfield.
How many siblings do you have?
I had 10 brothers and sisters.
And they are.
Raymond, well, the first one I don't remember the name. I don't think they even had a chance to name it. There was Raymond, Elliot, Mildred, Maddie, Francis, Edward, Roland. I missed Alma, she's before Edward. Roland and Edith, and a baby died that was named Hope.
Did any of them leave the area to live, or did they all live here in Pittsfield their entire lives and still live here?
Well, no, Raymond left Pittsfield and went Long Island way, and Elliot moved out. Well, he moved to Long Island, and then he moved to California, and that's where he passed.
How many of them are still living?
There's only 3 of us living. You know, that's Mildred, myself, and Edith.
And still live, your sisters still live here
In the area.
Why did Elliot leave?
He got married, and he moved to Long Island, and then they just decided to go out to California. I don't know if it was his choice or his wife's choice, but he was there until he got killed out there.
Were any of your brothers in the military?
Roland. Roland was in the military.
Besides your siblings, did anybody else live with you when you were growing up in some kind of background?
Oh, I don't know where they slept, but they were there. We did have a roommate. I don't even remember his name, I'm sorry. I don't remember his name. The only thing I remember, he used to buy us a barrel of candy a month. We did at that time, but then we all lost our teeth by the time we were about 20.
That does happen.
We thought it was great at the time.
Where did you live in Pittsfield?
Well,
your family growing up?
we first lived on Pomeroy Avenue, and we moved to Dewey Avenue. From Dewey Avenue, we moved to Onoda Street. From Onoda Street, we moved to Robbins Avenue, and then West Street.
In various places?
Yeah, but mostly always on the west side.
Oh, on the west side. How long have your parents been deceased? Remember when they...
I believe my mother passed in 85, and my father, 87? No, that was too soon. My mother must have been, I guess I could go upstairs and get that.
I thought it was some years before.
It was. She died quite a few years. I can't remember exactly the date, and I should because I just looked at it a couple of days ago.
I thought your father was quite elderly when he...
97.
Wonderful.
The mother was only
Quite young.
60 something.
Would you, you've been married?
Yes.
And your children?
I have a son and a daughter, Leon and Francie.
Yes.
She never liked it. And Leon lives in Boston. We call her Sis, but her name is Frances. She lives in Amherst.
And grandchildren?
I had 2 grandchildren, Tyra Fisher. That was a married name. Tyra and Eddie.
Do they live in this area?
No, Eddie just moved to California about a month ago, and Tyra lives in Albany. And Tyra has 2 children, Tatiana and Leasia. And Eddie has 1 little girl, Kiara.
Now, are you, you're a widow?
No, I was divorced before I became a widow. I mean, before he died.
But your ex-spouse,
He's dead now.
I don't remember. And your church affiliation?
Baptist,
Your whole family, I think,
as far as I can remember.
are.
We're all Baptist, yeah.
You remember any memories about church gatherings growing up?
Well, yeah, there was a lot of church gatherings, suppers, and they had a recreation room, and we used to put on little plays and things in the recreation room. We had like circus and talent shows, things like that.
And all of you children participated?
Not all of us, but we showed up anyway.
Showed up. Did your father do any catering for those affairs? He was a caterer.
He wasn't a caterer until later in life. He was the janitor of the Baptist church, or the custodian, when it was on North Street. And then he stayed with them on South Street for a few years.
Which is where it is now.
Where it is now. He was also the custodian at the museum for several years until he started catering. He loved baseball and sports. But
Could you talk a little bit about, I know wasn't he a
umpire.
An umpire?
He was an umpire for quite a few years around town. All the black ball teams. Yeah. We used to play at the Clap Park and Lacona Park and different parks around. Yes, but it was funny because every other time he went out to play baseball or something, he'd come home with a broken leg, a broken thumb, a broken nose. And I could hear Mother say, "Oh my God, Johnny's hurt again."
Oh, dear. Your mother was a homemaker?
Yes, yes. Until Dad started catering, and then she did waitress work with us and all. Well, when he was in the hospital, she had to go out to work, and she worked for a while.
But I remember her being at that.
Yes.
And at that time, there were most black women were out working.
Oh, really?
Instead of being at home, that was
Oh.
not a luxury that many
Well,
of us
she
could
had
afford.
so many of us to keep track of. I think she had to stay home most of the time.
Wasn't a luxury that we had.
No.
Has religion played a tremendous part in your life?
No, I don't. I can't say it has, because I was always working. I would go to church when I could. I still participate in whatever they have to do. I mean, but I don't go constantly. And it's only because I got out of going when I had parties to serve and stuff.
Because you were a caterer too.
Yes, and then I went over to the Shaker Village, and I run the cafeteria over there for 7 years. And I didn't get out to go anywhere. That's one reason why I finally decided to give it up, because I felt I was losing contact with everybody and everything.
As with being a caterer, you for holidays and special occasions.
This is it, yeah.
Now, where did you go to school? And
I started at Bartlett, which is on another street. It is Company. And then from there, I went to Tucker. And then I quit.
do you know why, or?
Yeah, I quit. First off, I didn't like school. I hated it with passion. And
What were some of the things that you remember about it?
I remembered that I had to stand in the hall most of the time because I'd be going down the hall grinning. And there was one teacher that every time she saw a smile on my face, she wouldn't even let me in the classroom. She says, "I know you're up to some devilment," and she'd send me out in the hall. So I guess I didn't like standing in the hall as much as I did. Fred Dillard always got me laughing just before I go into geography class. And that teacher would be standing right at the door looking at me. But my main reason for quitting, Gladys Dillard was leaving Pittsfield, and the lady she worked for had a friend, Mrs. Whitney, that wanted somebody to do some work. And Gladys asked me if I would go, and I said, "Oh, well, school starts in 2 weeks." She said, "Well, maybe she could find somebody in that 2 weeks if you would fill in." So I went there to fill in, and the lady asked me if I'd stay. And I said, "I don't know, I'd have to ask my mother." So I went home to ask Mother if I could stay. And she said, "Well, if that's what you want." Because years ago, they didn't think it was quite necessary to have the education that you need to have today. And so,
Schools were not very encouraging either. Some of the schools were not very encouraging.
No. So I just quit, and I stayed there for 8 years. And I found out they wasn't paying me anything compared to other people. So I left there. Where did I go? I guess I went doing day's work. And then I started working with my father, and he started catering. And of course, he had a restaurant on West Street.
Okay, tell us about the restaurant.
He had a restaurant, which was, there was five, you know, the Busy Bee, Berkshire, and Johnny's Restaurant. They were all on West Street. And Dad had a small restaurant. And gangrene had set in his leg after he had it 2 or 3 years from one of the breaks that he had had. And Mother couldn't run the restaurant, so she had to close it.
What years? Before the war? Or?
Yes. Yes, because he wanted the boys both to quit school and help in the restaurant. And I remember my brother Elliot crying because he did not want to quit school. And he was crying, and he did quit. And so did Raymond, but Raymond didn't hang around too long after he quit school. He got too grown, I guess. But after Elliot got married, he went back to school. And he had a pretty good job when he passed.
This is the one in California.
Yeah. I believe he was working for the state. Well, he had a good job in Long Island also, because Bobby was a good pusher for him, and she was a nurse, so it worked out very well for him.
Did you find it difficult to get those jobs in Pittsfield that were really
I hardly ever applied for a job in my life. Somebody would call me, and that's how I went to all the jobs I ever had, through somebody just calling me and asking me if I would go and work for these people. So that's one thing. I wouldn't even know how to write a
resume is what they need now.
I really wouldn't know how to write a resume because I never really, all of my jobs were just more or less handed to me. Yeah.
And that's what you stayed in the catering business and word of mouth kind of thing.
Right. The only reason I'm not doing catering, more or less, is because the young people of today don't bother because they can buy everything, all platters, all fixed. And the ones that I used to work for practically all have passed.
So that was, I remember growing up, and we all knew that Mr. Pacific was a caterer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I enjoyed it.
Yes. Well, obviously, I remember listening to helping Wilkes sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the kinds of games you played as a child?
Well, of course, we played with dolls. We had a funeral to run over. We called ourselves operating on the doll. Split her right down the middle. And the neighbor's daughter went home crying. But we used to play a lot of games. And Dewey, my Uncle Dewey, played the piano. And cousin Ned, Brissett, played the violin. And like Saturday nights, they would come over and we'd take the dining room table, put it out on the porch, and we'd dance. Sunday nights, Dewey would come back and we'd sing. And Grandma Brissett, when we used to go to her house, we used to play musical chairs a lot. But she could think of more games for us to play, all kinds of games. But just stuff in the house, she'd just pull it out.
And this was in Pittsfield?
Oh, yeah.
In Pittsfield.
Yeah, she lived on Pomeroy Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, we used to love to go there.
And at the time, weren't there organizations that had affairs and dances and
yeah, and there was a woman, Mrs. McFadden, I believe her name was. she used to put on all kinds of things. At the Grange Hall, opposite the post office, like talent shows and what's the name, weddings, Tom Thumb weddings, and that sort of thing. Because I remember my father was the bride one time, and Dickie Williams' father was the groom. That was a riot. Oh gosh, that was a riot. Because my father couldn't find any ladies' shoes to fit him, he had to wear sneakers. And my mother used to make all these paper dresses for them, for these weddings. Yeah, we had a lot of good times.
So it was a very active black community then.
Oh, yeah, there was something. It seemed like there was something for us to do all the time. And when we wasn't out doing something, there was somebody at the house. Our house was always full. Yeah, there was somebody there all the time. Couldn't wait to get home from work and didn't know who was going to show up next.
What fun that was.
It was, you know. I remember when Sissy was going to high school, I used to come in from work hour or so after she got home. The house was full. She'd bring all half of the children from school home, move the dining room table, and they'd be dancing away in the dining room.
You were they were.
I knew where she was, and most every day she had company. And I never objected to it. And on Saturdays, I used to let them have a party almost every Saturday night. Because as you say, then you knew where they were. And then I'd sit upstairs in the hall, and if two came up to go to the bathroom at the same time, sorry, only one at a time. There's only one place in there. So I called myself being a chaperone, but I guess they might have been going out the door. I don't know.
It was necessary.
Oh, yes. In fact, if the kids had more chaperones today, they'd be a lot better off. They really would. Because when we went to parties and stuff, my mother, Ruth Barnabas, Emma Evans, and Aunt Gussie, they all went with us. They all went with us to all the parties that we went to. I remember a party I took the kids to in Great Barrington. I believe it was at your house.
On the porch.
On the porch.
Yeah, sure. It was near the house.
Yeah, yeah, I remember. Yeah. You had 2 or 3 parties down there.
Yeah. We had the boys had their place. We got them use the porch. And they had a couple of parties here.
Yeah, yeah. I remember taking the kids there.
Mm-hmm. Very different today.
Oh, really?
Did you have any sibling rivalries in your brothers and sisters in your friends? We used to play all the time in our family.
Well, I used to be fighting. I don't know why. I kind of know why. Because I was always picking up things. And with 8, 9 others, throwing their books here and their coat here and this, that. And I was always picking up. And if they left something, then I'd get mad and I'd start fussing. And Mrs. Evans, who lived upstairs over us, used to come down and get me and take me up to her house. I don't know if she knew who was starting the fights or not. And I don't remember for sure.
Or it was Winnie's
Winnie's mother.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure who started them. And of course, Mother and Dad.
You never get to the bottom of it.
No. Mother and Dad went shopping every Saturday night. And we'd watch them. We lived on the Notice Street, which was right up here. And we'd watch them turn to go down West Union Street. As soon as they turned to go down West Union Street, the boys got the pots and pans out and started making candy. They started cooking. But the trouble was, they would never clean up their mess. And they'd hide the pans under the kitchen sink because Mother had a skirt like that. And then I'd offer to stay home from school and clean house, and then I'd find all these pans. Oh, dear. I wish I was as ambitious today as I was then.
Well, you've done your job. You paid your dues. What are your household chores? You mentioned that you stayed home from school sometimes in the house.
Yeah.
Special chores?
I used to like to just stay home and clean. Nothing special. We all had to do dishes, take turns doing dishes. Edith's the one that would always have to go to the bathroom. And then she'd stay in there and stay in there. And we'd get mad and we'd go ahead and do them because we had somewhere we wanted to go. And she still was bad. She still was bad.
Do you remember any poems that you learned from school at all, that are recitations that sometimes when you're learning things in school, you would have to
I only remember one that I was supposed to be reciting up at the Christian Center, and it was called the Epworth Mission. And I got up to recite. My mother, my mother said, and I get to laughing again, and I find it. My mother said when she was small, and they had rally day and all, she was as straight as could be, and not a nice, brave girl like me. And I messed the thing up all.
You remember that?
I remember, and I still remember it. I still remember it. Because I messed it up so bad. And I was so happy to have a part to say. And then got up there and got to mess it up.
You mentioned that the Christian Center used to be something else.
Epworth Mission. And it was a church.
Oh.
They had church services there and stuff, and they used to have, during the week, you could take your babies there to be weighed and stuff. But we
So it's like a health center also for children?
Well, it was 1 or 2 days a week. But it's been there a long time. And it's been...
Who operated it? Was it operated by ministers or just the neighborhood, the town, the city of Pittsfield?
Must have been the city.
It was open to everybody, anybody?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And it was a good place for us to go when, if our parents had to go somewhere, they could send us there and they know we'd be there until, for a couple hours or whatever. Yeah, it was kind of like a center where you could just go and play games and whatever.
Sort of a forerunner of what the center is like now, the Christian Center.
Right, yeah.
And it had
Of
some
course, years ago, I mean, it wasn't that they gave away clothes like they do now. They didn't have the meals there then. Only special. Once in a while they had a special dinner for families. In fact, they had classes there for a while too. Like they had kindergarten there instead of Tucker School. They didn't really have nurseries way back then, but they had kindergarten across there. Because I distinctly remember John Dwyer beating me up all the time.
Those things sort of stay in your mind.
Yeah.
How did white and black children get along in your neighborhood?
I never noticed any difference. I never did. We all seemed to get along fine. And it seemed like Roland and Edward's friends were all white, really. Us girls, we mingled mostly with the black girls. But Edward and Roland, just about all their friends were white.
You mentioned most of your friends were black. What were some of their names?
Greta Williams, Florence Ford, who became Telefarrell. She's got several children still.
You mentioned the Dillards, were they?
Oh, Fred Dillard and Mark Dillard, Gladys Dillard, his sister felt that she was a little older than us or above us. So, well, she was a little older because she was able to move out of town and go to New York when we were still kids. But we used to, Fred, Mark, Liz, and all of us. Harry Stallings, they used to meet me on the corner of West Street coming from work and walk me home. Of course, there was Francis Alberta Pierce. And
Were some of them relatives of yours also, or are they just all friends?
now, of course, Liz, Evelyn and Myrtle were relatives,
Yes.
but they were down in Lenox. And when I'd go down there, I'd get them in trouble. And they'd send me home.
Oh, dear.
Evelyn probably has told you that time. We were sitting on the porch, or had to sit on the porch because I said something bad. And sit there the whole day.
The whole day. And parents and grandparents meant business in those days.
Oh yeah, they didn't fool
They didn't
around.
fool around. What values did you really learn from your parents and your grandparents? I mean, that discipline certainly was big thing.
Oh, definitely. You better. I remember one time we went to Onoda Lake, and my brothers, Raymond, Elliot, Mildred, Maddie, and myself, and my mother told us to be home at 6 o'clock for supper. We always ate together. And that is so bad today that even the wives and husbands
Right.
hardly eat together.
Nobody.
They put it in a plate and go
Yes.
watch TV or something.
Or they sent out for something.
Yeah. But no, we always ate together. And this night we were all supposed to be home, either 5 or 6 o'clock. And coming home, there was this fellow in town called Francis Fieldy, and he was a little retarded, but he always was carrying snakes around in his pocket. And on the way from the lake, we came through the woods, and he was around. I don't know if he was at the lake or if we met him in the path or what. But anyway, he had called Raymond and Elliot over and pulled up a big rock, and there was a couple of snakes. So all the way home, the boys are picking up rocks and they found a gallon can and was putting the snakes in the can. And we kept hollering, "Come on, we're going to be late. Come on, we're going to be late." My mother was at the door with a belt. And every one of us got beat. She was tired when she got through.
That was it.
But she gave every one of them. We couldn't explain to her. The boys told us not to leave them. And then I stayed home one day right after that, and I was doing dishes in the kitchen. And there goes a snake under the sink, near the sink. I run upstairs to Mrs. Evans. She comes down with a broom. She was as scared as I was. And we got rid of that snake. But then I told on the boys, told my mother and father that the boys had a can of snakes in the cellar. Well, there was so much stuff in our cellar. I don't know, there may still be snakes in that cellar. So they had to go down and find the can and get them out and bury them up on the hill. But that was one of the bad things that we all got beat the same day. And she didn't fool. My mother didn't fool too much. She mostly took the heel of her shoe.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, even today, if these kids got a good spanking and not called child abuse, they'd be better off. So I used to hate a scolding, though, worse than a spanking. I didn't mind getting spanked because I felt as soon as that hurt was gone, it was gone. But once I got scolded, it wouldn't seem
Stayed in your
to
mind.
leave me. Yeah, it stayed.
How did you discipline your children? Same.
Well, for a while I hollered at him a lot. And one day my son said to me, Mother, if you wouldn't holler so much and explain why you don't want us to do something, we'd listen. And I thought that was the best lesson I ever had.
Yeah, from your son.
Yeah. I thought, yeah. Then he said, we'd listen if you would explain why, instead of going around hollering. But, oh yeah, I made him be in at a certain time. And one time Leon didn't come in, I locked him out.
Ooh, that was a lesson.
That was a lesson because I never used to lock my door. I never locked my door on West Street until that night. And I didn't feel too bad because my mother was right next door, and I figured he'd fall in there and ask them to let him sleep there, which he did. So, but he stayed over there for almost a week. And Charlie Turville was rooming at the house at the time, and I was washing my car, which I don't do often, but I was then. And Charlie Turville said to him, Leon, why don't you get out there and help your mother wash her car? He said, she's mad at me. He says, well, you better get out there and help her wash her car. So he came out and I said, you ready to talk? About what? About what? I said, well, I think if you're going to live under my roof, you're going to go by my rules. Otherwise, you're going to have to find someplace else. So, and I said, because you're not going to be coming in the house every time I go to work and get some new clothes. You're going to take them all and be gone. So you can think about it. And if you can decide to go by my rules, you can come back and stay. But as soon as you mess up, you're gone. And it was only that one time I seemed to have to do it. And I think it hurt me more than it did him.
You had to say it.
Yeah.
You had to do it. I suspect that children value those lessons.
Because now he'll say, you know, I often think of the things that you did. And I said, and I often think of things that you did too.
I do too. Remember any stories you heard when you were growing up? Stories about anything, people, what was happening around in the city of Pittsfield?
Might have been gossip. Yeah, you need Liz here to tell you stories about some of the things that I used to do on the job. One job we had, this Scotty that just died, Scotty Caesar, Catherine Caesar, something like that. He used to meet Liz and I going to work on Monday mornings or whatever morning. And we'd stop and have a drink in some bar, and then we'd go on to work. And Liz and I worked the same place. Liz did the ironing and I did the cleaning. And the boy, the lady's son, he wouldn't do anything for his mother, but he'd do anything for me. And I'd say to him, Dave, I'm getting old now. How about you cleaning the oven? It's too much for me. How about you mopping the kitchen floor? One day we got to work and his mother said, Francis, will you ask Dave to shovel the path? So I got in there. Dave, what's wrong with you? How come you haven't shoveled this path? You know I'm too old to be plowing through this snow. Okay, Francis, whatever you say. And Liz would be in the other room dying laughing. And the dog comes sliding across the kitchen floor, and I tried to get the dog out of there 2 or 3 times. He'd go out one door and come in another. And I took him and gave him a kick. We never knew where the dog went. He never came back. He never came back. And then we were working for Norman Rockwell. When he had first built his studio in Stockbridge. And they had a dog. But I never liked a dog in my kitchen, and especially if I was cooking. I didn't want any dogs, and I would tell people, would you please put the dog in another room? Oh, he'll be all right. Okay, the dog came in the kitchen, and we were cooking. And I put him out one door, looked, he'd come in the other door. So finally I gave him a kick. And when I gave him a kick, he came in the other door growling at me. I said, oh, gee, Liz, what's going to happen? So Liz says, you stop kicking these dogs, or you're going to be in big trouble. So those were some of the
things that happened here.
some of the things that happened.
Now, you said that you did cook in various houses, and you also catered a lot. Remember any of your favorite recipes for meals that you...
No, because at the time I didn't know what I put in it.
They're always different. What about your mothers, your grandmothers?
My mother didn't cook very much. My mother's favorite thing when my father wasn't home, my father did all the cooking. Even at home, after he'd worked, he'd come home and cook. My mother, and if my mother was stuck with us, we got crackers and biscuit-looking crackers.
Milk crackers?
Milk crackers, yeah. And milk, or creamed eggs on toast, or creamed chip beef. And those were some of the things that she would think of. But I didn't have any real special recipes myself.
You cook so many different things.
Right, yeah. And a lot of times people would have their own suggestions, and you just come home and look in a book and find it.
When you said you started working outside the home very early, did you have to, some children did, contribute to the family finances?
I always did. My first job was doing dishes after school at Prince and Walker's house. Prince and Walker had a shop on South Street, and my Aunt Minnie worked for them. And she hated to do dishes, so I don't know if she paid me or if they paid me. But I got 50 cents a week, and I walked from Robbins Avenue to the monument in South Street, that George Street right across, every day after school. And I got 50 cents a week, and I give my mother a quarter. Everything I made, I gave her now, until I got married. And when I went to pay her, when I got married, she said, no, you're going to be. And then when I went to get my divorce, till this day, I often wondered where my mother got the money. I asked her if she could loan me $40 because the lawyer wouldn't start my divorce without a down payment. And I asked her if she could loan me $40, and she said, I'll give it to you tomorrow. Until this day, I have always wondered, where did she get $40?
And that's thing that she probably has.
She might have been saving the little quarters that I had given her all that time. Yeah, yeah. But I would have loved to know, you know, what she had to sacrifice to give it to me, although I paid her back. But I probably paid her back in quarters, too.
You have any hobbies? You
dance? Or? I used to love to dance. I still like to dance, but my ankles won't let me do too much dancing. And I used to like to sing, but my voice, I'm not a man, I'm not a boy, but my voice changed. I got an awful cold one year, and after that I couldn't carry a tune. So,
something in your
right,
bronchial tube.
Right. I always wanted to play an instrument, but John Crockett loaned me his saxophone to practice on. Then didn't I fall and broke my tooth?
Oh, dear.
And I had to give him his saxophone back because he was about ready to sell it. And and then I would have loved to play the piano. But I always worked. I could never say to you, or you say to me, Francis, you gotta practice or come to have what's the name on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, because I never knew what day I had to go to work. So I never had time to
develop it.
develop that. I enjoyed being in NAACP because we had some very nice affairs when we had the NAACP going.
Was that the only organization, civic organization?
Yeah, it was really the biggest one. I used to belong to the group. There was 5 of us girls, and we called ourselves the After 5 Girls.
Mm-hmm.
But we found out every time we wanted to give something, we were supposed to donate so much money to some organization. Mrs. Nevers was around at the time, and if you didn't say you were going to donate the money, and we were just getting started with it. I mean, how can you give when you really haven't got it to give?
Yes.
You know, and so that didn't last too long.
Well, one last question. Any other special memories that you have of being born in Pittsfield and raised and living your whole life?
I've never wanted to live anywhere else. I never have. I've been, you know, I've been on cruises. I've been traveled a lot, but I never had any desire to live anywhere else.
You have any other memories of just living here? And you've had, a wide array of friends
Well, I think years ago, like when the Globetrotters and the different bands and stuff were around, it was so much fun to be able to go to all those affairs that I enjoyed. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people so far. Haven't had any fights with anybody that I know of.
Good, that could be. I remember Mo talking about going to Showboat.
Oh. Well, I missed one dance at Showboat. And I cried like a baby because I was carrying Leon. And I tried on about 3 or 4 outfits and I couldn't stand the looks of myself. So I said to Big Leon, well, you go on. I'm not going. And so I didn't go. That was the only Showboat dance I ever missed. Of course, they was groups from Troy, groups from Albany. I went to a tremendous amount of affairs in Albany, Schenectady, Troy, because there was 3 or 4 different groups over there that I knew the people. In fact, for a long time, I said I knew more people in Albany than I did in Pittsfield.
I remember the big bands used to come to Albany.
Yeah.
When I was a teenager.
Right. Yeah.
Jimmy Munster.
Yeah, well, a lot of them came right to Showboat. And then the Bubble Room was a nice place, too, right here in town. Didn't last too long, I don't know why. But that was a nice place to give affairs.
Well, is there anything else you think you could add? Any other memory?
I don't know. I mean, I'll think of a lot of things when you
When I'm gone, yeah. So you feel as though you've had a really good, a rich life living in Pittsfield.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I've enjoyed living here. And my kids, they're always gone. Every place Sissy went, she wanted to move to. She was much different than I am. And I think if something happened to me, or as Leon gets older, he may be the only one to come back here. I doubt very much. Well, I don't know. Poor sis, she's not well. It's a little scary.
And he's still in Amherst.
Yeah, she's in Amherst. And she had to retire a couple of months ago. She had that bout with cancer. They found a spot on her brain. So she just got through going through that. So it's a little
worry.
Yeah, it's a worry. So,
Yeah. But you're well.
oh,
Yeah.
I'm fine. I want to stay that way.
Yes, absolutely.
I like
Every time I
being,
see you,
I
you
like being well. I love being
Don't-
well.
Don't we? Don't we all? Yeah.
Yeah.
I share some of those memories with you, especially with your family, family's home. And your parents were living. Your home was always an open home.
Oh, yes.
For everybody.
Yes, it was.
Passed through.
Yes.
Always after dances.
Yeah.
Always.
Well, when I lived on West Street, too, and after every dance.
Yes.
In fact, that's the one thing I feel bad about. Every New Year's, when we had a New Year's Eve dance, and everybody came back to the house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can't let everybody in.
Yeah, possibly.
You can only let the people you
You
know.
know.
And that's
That
the
has-
sad.
That has changed.
That has changed terribly, yeah. That, because as I say, until I moved here, I moved next door at first, and until I moved on this street, I never locked my doors. Never locked my doors. And I would be away for a weekend and come home and find a note, thanks for the weekend's lodging.
Wow.
Where
So
I
people
had
come in
friends.
and spend the weekend and leave
And leave me a note,
Leave you a
thanks
note.
for the weekend's lodging. And like that. And of course, Sissy, when she was in Long Island, she was in a lot of plays and stuff because she was hanging around with Stanley Green and that group. And they brought one of their plays to the museum called Out of the Frying Pan. And 29 of them stayed at that. Well, my attic, I had the attic fixed up like a dormitory, and there was room for 11 to sleep in the outer part of the attic. And then there was a room in the attic, and a couple of people could sleep in there.
And this was on West Street.
That was on West Street. And then I had twin beds in Leon's room, and double bed in Sissy's room, my room, couches, and it was a bad night. And one of the cars broke down coming from New York, and they had the address, and they finally got to the house, but we stayed up until about 4 o'clock waiting for them, and they didn't show. And finally I went on to bed. When I came down in the morning, there was 5 people sleeping on the dining room floor. They had gotten to the house finally. Just walked in and laid down and went to sleep. The reason they knew the house was because the other car that was traveling with them was there, so I guess they figured the door was unlocked. And I mean, now see, you could do something like that years ago. Somebody would shoot you if they walked in and found you these people sleeping on the floor today, you know?
And now you're living alone.
Right,
Very.
yeah. Well, that's why I finally stopped taking in roomers. I did take in roomers for a while, but I had 2 bad experiences, so I didn't think it was worth it.
But it's nice to have your sister.
Yeah.
And he is not too far away.
No, she's not far away.
I want to call Edythe Reid.
Oh, right. You can call her. Oh, right.
I see her.
She lives in the Columbia Arms. Liz Tomlinson.
Oh, is that her name? Oh, I didn't know she
She had, she died too.
Oh,
Where she lived in Home. Her telephone number is 4429784.
784. What a memory. Oh, numbers? Wow.
My father and my brother Elliot was working on Lake Buell, at Lake Buell, when he tripped and fell running to the lake for a swim and got a compound fracture. And he was in the hospital. The doctor said his leg wrong. He was in the hospital. They had to reset his leg, and he was in the hospital for a year. And that's when my mother had to go out and find a job. And
It's after that he opened a restaurant.
and then when he got better, he had opened up a restaurant on West Street. And I don't remember exactly how many years he had it. He probably only had it about 2 years when gangrene set in his leg, and he had to give it up.
Oh, Lake Buell. Thank you, Fran, for this wonderful interview. Today's date is February 17th, 1998. Mrs. Frances Duval is an active, vibrant, outgoing 81-year-old who lives alone and thoroughly enjoys life.